Hi, it's Shelley with Strategic Sales Advisors, and welcome back to my channel, Building Sustainable Sales. This year, I am sharing insights designed to help business owners enhance their sales processes, their strategies, their teams, and their systems to drive sustainable growth. And today, I want to focus on sales analysis for small to mid-sized businesses. This is a critical practice for identifying what's working, what's not, and where we can make impactful changes. So if you want to get the most out of your sales efforts, this video is for you. So let's dive in. First of all, let's talk about why sales analysis is really truly the backbone of informed decision making in your business. Regular analysis is crucial for multiple reasons. And the first one is it really helps you understand which strategies and efforts are delivering the best return on investment. If we're not tracking data around what we're doing, then we have no way to say if we're spending money or we're spending our internal resources, our people resources, whatever it is, what are we getting? What's returning on that, right? What's that flow through, or how are we driving our profit down from top line to profit if we don't really understand the data around it? Tracking sales analysis and data and all of that kind of stuff also allows us to identify if we're running into bottlenecks or inefficiencies in our sales process. And I've talked about this before, but when we have a very sort of streamlined, efficient sales process, we are converting more business faster within our organization, which of course drives higher top line revenue and ultimately will drive more profit because of that efficiency that we're creating there. So we want to make sure that we are identifying bottlenecks and then tracking changes that we can make so that we are creating that efficiency. Again, the other thing that it can do is it can help us provide clarity, allowing us to actually allocate our resources efficiently. And again, whether that is financially or that is team member resources, it allows us to do that more efficiently. So let's talk about an example. So let's say that you are a small to mid-sized business owner, right? Business owner Joe or business owner Jill. And you have been working and conducting quarterly analysis meetings. In that, you may discover things like a significant percentage of leads are coming from your referral channels, but you weren't dedicating enough resources to that space. So you weren't really focused in on driving performance out of your referral partner network. You're not cultivating the channel, you're not spending your resources in that space. If we can adjust based upon seeing that, right? Seeing that data that is actually providing you the largest percentage of leads, then we can lean into that heavier and understand what is doing that. Why are we getting the more leads out of our referral network? Is it the trusted advisor aspect of that coming from, warm leads, or is it something else that's driving that? Two things can happen, right? If we lean into that, then we can create more of that energy, so more leads. Or if we understand what is driving that, then we can maybe use those learning lessons in some of our other channels. So if we don't have the data, if we aren't doing the analysis and we're not tracking, then we can't lean into those types of things. So it's a good space or good understanding to have. Now that we kind of understand that baseline, let's talk about some of the key areas I feel you should be focusing on when you're looking at sales analysis. And of course, the very first one is your pipeline, right? Your sales pipeline. And again, you'll hear me use sales pipeline or sales cycle, those types of things relatively interchangeably. But what we're talking about are the different stages of a customer as you go from prospect to conversion or prospect to lost business, right? So when we're tracking our sales pipeline, when we're looking at the data and the analysis around our sales pipeline, we want to look at things again like are deals or are our clients progressing through each stage efficiently? And if they're not, we want to understand why. We want to start to dive into that. So are our clients going from prospect to discovery to proposal to objections to closed deal? Is that a very smooth process, or are we seeing, again, bottlenecks, or are we seeing stalling or drop off, right? So that's the other area that we want to look at in the pipeline. Are we seeing people sort of get left in the cart? Great example to visualize this would be e-commerce or retail online selling. We've all done that. We've all pretty much purchase something online at one time or another. And you can be on your computer shopping and see something you like. Let's say it's a sweater, for example, and you like that sweater and it's in your size. And so you pick it up and you drop it in your cart. And then you're shopping some more, and then you decide, you know what, I really don't need that sweater. And so you just, you drop off the page, you leave. Well, that is a sales pipeline, right? It's an online e-commerce sales pipeline. And what you're seeing is that I'm getting things to the cart, but I'm not necessarily purchasing it. So I'm dropping off. And you see that a lot in retail business. Sometimes it could be that you get to the checkout, right, in the cart, and you realize that they don't take your type of credit card that you want to purchase with, or they don't take your payment type, right? So again, there's a bottleneck there where you start to see people drop off because maybe you don't have the right way for billing purposes. So we want to be looking at that from a sales pipeline, not just in direct-to-consumer business, but in our B2B space. Where are those bottlenecks or those areas of our sales pipeline where our customers are potentially dropping off, or where we don't have that efficient flow to drive our performance? Second thing we want to be looking at is our sources. Where are our leads coming from? Which channels are bringing in the highest quality leads? So again, quality and quantity aren't necessarily the same space. If they are for you, fantastic, where you're getting the highest quantity and they're all high quality. I see this a lot when businesses have done a lot of work around their ideal client profiles and then are leaning heavily into those lead sources that will find those ideal client profiles and bring them to them. They're getting the highest quantity of those ideal client profiles that are at the highest quality. But we want to be looking at that. So let's take another example. Let's say that you are in the home services-based business and you are leaning heavily, for example, into social media, but into the LinkedIn space. You're probably not going to be getting not only the highest quantity, but you're definitely not going to be getting the highest quality leads coming out of that, because that's not necessarily where your consumer sits. So you want to lean heavier into those channels where your consumer sits. So again, looking at that from a lead sources, what are those high quality channels for you? Not necessarily the high quantity channel for you. And then when we're looking at the different spaces, are there certain lead source channels that are underperforming or that are not worth the investment? I talk about this a lot to my business clients, especially those that participate heavily in trade shows and events. Because if we aren't tracking that, because that is a lead source, if we are not tracking the annual performance of business opportunities coming out of a trade show or event towards the return on the investment that we made in that trade show and event, then we are throwing money away. 100%. Because if we cannot track back our business opportunities to that trade show or event, or we are not seeing the performance on that, then we are spinning our wheels and we are spending money that we could be using in other channels to drive better performance. So again, we want to look at that across all of the different types of channels, whether that is through marketing, whether that is through networking and different organizations and industry associations that we belong to, trade shows and events. All of those lead sources need to be reviewed from a data and analysis standpoint to ensure that we are investing in the right spaces to drive the best quality leads that we can. Next, we want to look at conversion rates. Conversion rates are, of course, critical to the success of any company or organization. That is, again, what that percentage is from a business opportunity going from prospect down into a converted or a new client or new customer for you. So how many of our customers are actually turning into paying customers? Again, going back to quantity versus quality when we talk leads. What is our percentage of our leads that go into and become paying customers for us or paying clients for us? And is there a stage within our sales process or our sales pipeline where conversion rates drop? Again, going back to the conversation or the example I was giving of e-commerce, right? And we get down to the situation of you don't take my payment style. Well, I'm going to drop at that point, right? I'm not going to convert as a customer of yours because there is a sticking point or a bottleneck there. So that is causing a bottleneck in conversion. So we want to make sure that we're focusing in on, are there different stages where we are seeing significant drop off, where business isn't transitioning to the next stage and into converted business. Next, we want to look at team performance. And this is specific to the sales team. So are your individual sales reps meeting their targets? And there's multiple ways to look at this, and reasons that you would want to track this and look at this. The first is, of course, is to make sure that your sales reps are doing the jobs that they have been assigned to. If they have been assigned a specific industry or market segment or territory, for example, we want to ensure that they are hitting the milestones and targets that we have created through goals and other areas to drive the performance that we need out of them in that space. And if they aren't, then we need to look at what are those pivots that we need to make. Is it a situation where the sales team member needs additional training in order to do their job more efficiently and better? Do we need to have a bit more oversight on them and make sure that they are doing the job that we are paying them for? Or is it a situation that we all ran into in 2008 and frankly 2020 during the pandemic, where specific market segments, or in the case of the pandemic, almost all market segments, stopped buying? So let's take a great example from the pandemic situation and from my background in hospitality. Of course, when the pandemic rolled around, we saw all business travel, all leisure travel, all of that dry up. And those people within my businesses that I had purview over that were targeted towards those, almost overnight, their performance dried up. Simply because there was no way for them to meet their targets, because there was no business opportunities traveling. There were no customers or consumers traveling that would need to stay in a hotel. So what did we do? Well, we pivoted, understanding who was traveling nurses, federal government, whoever was actually doing travel to the different cities where I had properties. Then we redeployed our sales teams in order to focus our efforts on driving the most performance out of those so that we could keep the doors open as much as possible, right? So we want to take a look at the data and get a better understanding. Why aren't our sales reps meeting their targets if they're not? And then we want to deploy the best resources or the best allocation of our resources to fix that. So training, redeployment, or potentially they're not performing and we need to transition them out of the role. On the other side of it, and this is something that I talk about a lot with the business owners that I do work with, is how are their activities? So when we're looking at team performance, how are their activities aligning with the results that we want to get? So, for example, if you have sales reps that are deployed to sell, but they also are doing account management. So they are not only selling to new clients and new business opportunities, but they are managing existing accounts and renewals of their contracts. So maybe it's something that's on an annual renewal, insurance or HR type business, whatever. If you have them doing both of those, and what we're seeing is that, but you're incentivizing, for example, on the renewals and not on the new business development activity side of things, what we're going to see is we're going to see them focus in on where they're incentivized, right? On the activity side of things. So we want to make sure that when we're doing this, that we're not only creating compensation around the different activities or the different behaviors that we want to see, but then we are tracking that activity level to do it. I tell business owners all the time that, especially in new sales roles, in areas of performance where you have never had a salesperson. So maybe it's you're entering a new market, or your business has grown enough that you're adding a dedicated salesperson who is focusing strictly on sales. What I want to see out of them initially is I want to see them focused on the sales activities, on making prospecting phone calls, on, proactive outreach to referral networks, on networking, on getting in front of potential clients so that they can get that business movement moving. If you do the activities, the sales activities, the sales revenue will follow. I'm working through that right now with a client where, the ramp up time was a little bit longer than we thought it would be. But I kept saying, we're doing the activities, the revenue is going to follow. And that's what we're seeing now, is we're seeing consistent business opportunities converting for that role, for that sales rep, but also for the company. So again, we want to focus in on activity level, aligning with the results, and making sure that we are compensating for the activities that we want to see so we get the results we want to get. And finally, another area that we want to track from a data and analysis standpoint is customer retention, of course. Are your existing customers staying with you? Are we seeing extreme turnover? What's the length of time that they traditionally stay with you? And then what's that lifetime value of the clients? we want to continue to focus in on that, because the only way for a company or organization to grow is to ensure that they have client retention and then layering new opportunities or new clients on top of that. That's the only way you're going to scale your revenue potential. So we want to make sure that we do have a focus in on what does client retention look like? Is it going up or going down? That type of thing. So when we want to make our sales analysis as effective as possible, we need to leverage tools and techniques to help us down that pathway. So let's start on the tool side. And of course, the very first tool I'm going to talk about is CRM systems. We need to make sure that we have effective CRM systems and platforms like HubSpot or Salesforce if you have a very complex company organization, or Zoho, so that we can track and provide data on pipeline process and progress and lead sources and your team performance. If we are not utilizing a platform in order to track how we are performing in our sales organization, if we are using manual processes such as Excel spreadsheets and things like that, the ability to pull data out of that becomes significantly more challenging, and the decision making that you're doing is no longer being made on, actual data and an analysis of what's going on within your not only your company but your industry. You're making decisions on gut, which sometimes that works out, but most often those gut decisions don't necessarily work out the best. So let's get a CRM system in place so that we have the data in order to analyze and make smart decisions. The second thing would be potentially layering in some type of analytics software. So if we're looking to track things like online behavior, we may want to utilize something like Google Analytics so that we can understand what our clients or customers out there are doing. What's that behavior as they engage online, whether that's through social media or through an online e-commerce space, if you sit in that space. Another tool that I'm a big proponent of potentially is Tableau. If you are especially in a small to mid-sized company space, Tableau is a great tool for you. If you're a very large company and have millions of lines of data, Tableau can be a bit glitchy. At least it used to be. It's been a while since I've gotten to use Tableau. But Tableau gives you that ability to then pull the data in and then cut that data and be able to review and look at it to make smart decisions. I also like the ability for something like Tableau to create effective charts and graphs and things like that, because I'm a very visual person, and I think a lot of people can see the story in charts and graphs that maybe they can't necessarily see in numbers or spreadsheets. So having that ability, that's a great way to understand sales performance metrics. And then again, sales dashboards. And, the reality is that if you're using an identified CRM system, it's typically going to have dashboards built into it, right? Real-time dashboards give you that ability to have a quick overview of your key KPIs and spot trends relatively quickly. If you are using a sort of industry-specific CRM system, something that is designed for your industry, just take a careful look at it and make sure that the dashboards that are created for it are not just all operationally driven, because oftentimes, especially for service-based businesses, the CRM systems are really built more for operational with a side of sales versus a very sales-centric view. And so we see that the dashboards tend to be more operationally job time, deployment, routing, those types of things, versus on the sales side of things where we're looking at those metrics that we want to look at from a sales perspective. If you don't have a tool or resource that has a strong CRM in it, I highly suggest you have a conversation with your current system to see if they have an integration into a HubSpot or a Zoho or something else where the backend API can be integrated better. I wouldn't say, deploy multiple different systems that you would have to manually, update both of them or multiple ones at the same time to run your company organization unless it's absolutely necessary, because that just eats time, which is a definite resource that you have. But we want to make sure that we're using tools that will be very effective for the performance of our company organization. On the techniques side of things, we want to do things like we want to have segmentation. So we want to break down our data by region or by product or by customer segment so that we can uncover trends that are going on. Again, if we see that a specific customer segment is driving a significant portion of a specific product or services sales, then we want to look at that and study it and understand the why behind that. And then we want to leverage and see if we can make that grow. And then we want to track to see, is that going up or down? Is there seasonality involved with that segmentation? So we want to be looking at that. Trend analysis, again, comparing data over time to identify those patterns or seasonal shifts. This is really important in home-based businesses, especially things like lawn care. If you are a lawn care company in the Northeast, your seasonality is going to be significantly different than a lawn care company down here in the South. I have a lawn care company and they come around year round and take care of my lawn. They'll do the general, sweep of the yard for leaves and things like that once or twice a year, but there's not a huge growth in that in my space. Whereas in the Northeast, there might be a significant challenge around that, and then they also need to take into account things like snow removal when they can't necessarily get access to the yard, but maybe when they're not doing mowing and trimming and things that they would do during normal seasonality, they could leverage in or layer in snow removal during low season for them, right? So understanding what are those trends up or down, and then how do we leverage in different product or services to provide the best performance for our clients and our business. And then finally, from the consumer side of things or the customer side of things, we want to utilize surveys and feedback. We want to make sure that we are collecting qualitative insights from our customers out there. What is their feedback on our products and services, on our sales process, on our sales team members, all of those kinds of things. But we don't want to forget about using surveys and feedback from our sales team members as well, because they are the ones that are actually frontline with our customers and consumers at the very beginning. So they have a lot of great information that can be fed in and that can understand trends, that can understand what's going on in different segmentations or with the products and things like that. So we want to make sure that we are utilizing all of those different resources across the board. All right, so analysis is really only valuable if you actually use it to identify and address gaps within your business or your processes. So here's what we want to look for, and I've mentioned a couple of these already. The first one is underperforming channels. Are there lead sources that consistently fail to convert? Then why are we spending time, money, or people, resources in those channels? If that is not the right channel for you, just like if that is not the right client for your product or service, then we need to move on and we need to find the right ones, because you could spend years going down the wrong path and it's not going to bring you any business growth whatsoever. So let's identify and understand underperforming channels, and then let's make decisions on how do we pivot away from them. We want to identify things like team bottlenecks. So are there sales reps that are struggling with specific parts of the sales cycle, for example? Maybe we need to give them additional training or resources in order to overcome that struggle or that bottleneck. Another great example was a company that I was working with where the sales leader needed to be involved in every single proposal that went out, and not just involved in signing off on the proposal, but they needed to be actively involved in the writing of the proposal. That was a significant bottleneck for the company organization. If you have 4 or 5 salespeople and they're bringing, proposals to the sales leader, and the sales leader is the one that needs to write them up before they go out, because there isn't trust involved in creating, that proposal, then we've got a challenge. We need to do some additional training potentially for the sales team members so that they understand how to write the proposals. And then we need to create or craft that trust in the sales leader so that they have trust that the right proposals are going out at the right amount of time. We need to get rid of that bottleneck in that space. And then things like, a gap around pipeline drop-offs. Again, we've mentioned this before, but are there prospects disengaging in a particular stage of your sales cycle? What do we need to identify in that? What trend is coming along? And how can we either mitigate that or understand that maybe that's not the right client fit and we need to pivot? And a great example here would be a company that I worked with where we were having significant drop-off and low conversion going all the way through the sales cycle. And what we uncovered was that the business development team that was having the initial conversation with the prospect and setting up the appointments for the sales team to then go through discovery and then the demo of the product, when the sales team was getting to the discovery, they were uncovering a significant proportion of those that had been scheduled with them really truly wouldn't find benefit in their product that they were selling, and so weren't then moving on to the demo stage. That was the pipeline drop off. What we understood in there was that the qualification through the business development team, they weren't understanding what an ideal client looked like. And so when they were doing the discovery, when we positioned them and took a lot of the discovery off of the sales team and put that onto the business development team, when they were having that initial conversation and before they were setting the appointment with the sales team to then go through the conversion process, they were better understanding through discovery what the right fit customer was, and they were only scheduling the right fit customers for those calls and demos. And so now we were converting a significant amount of the business simply because we had fixed that pipeline drop off because there was a little bit of an education gap there. All right, so now we've identified the challenges and we need to make the changes so that we are fixing the trends or the negative trends or the gaps that we're seeing. So first thing we want to do is we want to focus in on things like optimizing our processes. So streamlining or adjusting steps in our sales cycle or sales funnel to improve our efficiency. Again, let's take away the friction in sales so that we are moving more of the business from prospect to conversion. We may need to reallocate resources and invest in more high-performing sales channels to reduce spend on underperforming ones. Or we may need to pivot some of our sales reps into more high-performing or high lead generating segments. Or we might need to reallocate resources. So investing more in our high-performing channels and reducing on our underperforming ones. Or potentially maybe we need to reallocate sales resources, so sales rep resources, from low performing or low producing segments or territories into higher performing ones where maybe we need more than one sales rep against a market or against a segment. And then we also want to train our team. So we want to give our team additional coaching or tools for in those areas where our team is struggling. So if we are seeing significant struggles with overcoming objections, then maybe we need to do some reinforcing training on how do we overcome objections. Or potentially in that space, maybe we need to give reinforcing training on discovery, so that we're uncovering those objections far earlier and can deal with them so that it's not going down the pike and taking the sales funnel a significantly longer amount of time. All right, making changes is only the first step, right? So once we've made those changes, we need to be tracking their impact to ensure that they're effective. So how are we going to do that? Well, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to use our KPIs to actually measure success, such as higher conversion rates, faster sales cycles, or improved team productivity. We want to make sure that the changes that we have made are actually creating the impact that we want or that we had assumed that we were going to make with those changes. We also want to schedule things like regular check-ins to assess progress and adjust as needed. And this is really important. At minimum, when you are making changes such as these, we want to make sure that we are tracking these at minimum on a 90-day cycle. To be honest, especially from a sales, if we're looking at trend and market changes, segmentation changes, that type of thing, I'd be looking at this on a monthly basis through at least the first 6 months to make sure that the changes that we've made are driving the performance that we want. Especially if there are challenges in your market or in your business. We want to make sure that we are catching positive or negative trends earlier than later so that we can continue to make the changes that we need to make to drive the performance that we want to get. And then we want to compare the results from the before to the after, right? And see what's driving the improvement. Again, we're continuing to utilize our data and analyze that data to make sure that, again, the changes that we've made are driving the improvement that we want to make. And if they're not, that we're making additional changes to get there. Or are we seeing something different happen, right? We want to make sure that we are taking everything into account. So let's wrap this video up. So sales analysis in this SMB space, and that small to mid-sized business space, involves understanding the importance of that regular analysis, focusing on key areas like your pipeline, your lead sources, and your conversion rates so that you are tracking across the board and understanding what's going on in your business from a sales performance standpoint. It's using tools and techniques like CRMs and segmentation to drive that better results. It's identifying the gaps and the weaknesses so that you can address them and create change. And then it's actually implementing those changes to improve your performance. So even if you've identified them, we need to go back and we need to then make changes so that we can improve that performance. And then it's tracking the impact of those changes to ensure that you've got that lasting success that we want to create in a business. So sales analysis isn't just about fixing problems. It's about continually refining your strategy so that you can drive the growth that you want to drive in your business. So I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more insights. And let me know in the comments, what's one area of your sales process you're looking to improve through analysis? I'd actually love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Building Sustainable Sales. Bye for now.